Hey, and welcome to the podcast. We are excited to be back today. And like we said last week, our theme for this month, the month of January, is this idea of losing the noise and how there's so many things coming out from winter break back into the semester that we have to deal with as youth pastors. But it's primarily due to the nature of kids have way too much time on screens. Kids have way too much time unadulterated, and kids just have basically whatever they want to do for the entire break. And this leads to some ideas of trouble. And one of the things that we are going to talk about today is this idea of scroll fatigue. And so post holidays, when we look at it, the reality is that students return overstimulated. And a lot of times that stimulation comes from digital media. And then with that overstimulation comes under motivation. So they don't want to do anything. And then they also are creatively numb and they don't feel that creative spark or that passion that can happen. And in all reality, this is not something that's just for students. This is something that we deal with as well. And so the question for today that we're going to kind of discuss is, are we discipling students to consume spiritual content, or are we discipling them to cultivate a creative faith? And so with that, we have a special guest today. Stephen Gehring has been on the show before three times?
Couple times at least, I think.
Yeah, at least a couple times. But so with that, Stephen is a licensed biblical counselor. And I'll let him go into a little bit more of detail on that. And then he is going to basically tell us what scroll fatigue is, why it's dangerous, and what we should be doing in the process to kind of get over that, and basically coach and teach our parents to do that as well. Because really, as we've said 100 times, we are there to equip parents. We are there to encourage parents. And this is a battle that has to be won at home too. So with that being said, Stephen, tell us about you and what your new company is. And then you can go into explaining scroll
Absolutely.
fatigue.
So thank you guys for having me on this morning. My name is Stephen Gehring. I am a licensed professional counselor. Before that, I was in youth ministry for like 14 years. And so, man, I love youth pastors. I love students. I love encouraging and just, providing counseling even to youth pastors, because I know that space and I know the challenges that come with that. And so that's a lot of my heart, is just encouraging youth pastors, encouraging people in the ministry. And so what I do, like on a day-to-day basis, I do counseling here in my office, and I also do some educational talks on things like digital devices, sex and sexuality, trying to take what the Bible tells us and integrate that with what we've discovered in psychology and in God's world. And so that's kind of the space that I live in. We've been doing our new business, Anchor and Insight, for about 5 months, and just trusting the Lord in that process of, it's different. Moving from ministry to the business world is a shift, but man, God is faithful. And so we're just kind of taking it, one day at a time. But anyway, thank you guys for having me on. So scroll fatigue is what we're talking about today. And when I think about that, it's something that's built into a lot of these apps and games that we use, that our students use, where we can become addicted to our devices. We can become addicted to, these different apps. And it's by design. So I think that's the first thing to say, is that the companies that make these apps, a lot of their goal is to get you on there and then to use the advertising to sell your data to other places to make a profit. And so that's challenging, because we don't use it that way. Like we use it, in the youth ministry world, you want to put good stuff out there. You want to encourage people. But knowing that, especially with students, their prefrontal cortex, so that's like this front part of the brain that makes good long-term decisions, that weighs consequences versus benefits, like that part just starts to develop in puberty. And it doesn't fully form until 20, 25 years old. And so for them especially, they don't have the discipline in their brain to say no as easily to phones as we do as adults. And so as you begin to scroll more and more, this idea of scroll fatigue, your brain, like the parts of your brain that are creative, that think through new things, they start to kind of shut off, and you start to move toward that consumer mindset. Hey, I'm just gonna intake all this information. And so when you're on devices, like, it's really easy to be on them for a long time, like to not put them down for a while. But even when we put them down, the way that our brains work, they can become wired against us to where it really easily we pick those things up. So there's something in our brains. They're called neural pathways, and it's our brain's way of like putting shortcuts in, so we don't have to consciously think about all the decisions we make. The example I use is brushing your teeth. Like when you pick up a toothbrush, you've done this thousands of times throughout your life. You don't have to consciously think, okay, I'm going to brush this tooth and I'm going to put this much pressure and do, like, your brain sees the toothbrush, fires down this pathway, and then you just do that thing on autopilot. So our brain, that's kind of the way that God designed our brains. It's a good thing for brushing your teeth or walking or breathing. It's not a good thing for these guys right here, because what happens is whenever we're bored, if our brain has fired down this pathway of like, oh, this releases dopamine, this makes me feel good, this makes me feel seen, this gets rid of boredom. Like even just seeing our phones, our brain is going to fire down that neural pathway before we're even consciously aware of it. And so it's like you're going to start picking up your phone before you even think or realize that you're picking up your phone. And so when that happens, you can just get sucked back into that loop to where even if you put it away, you get stuck there. And so, I mean, again, the things that come from this, the dependency on screens, especially if you're in youth ministry and you've taken trips with students, I know you've battled that, right? Like, okay, we need to put these things away. The comparison culture that comes from that, where we're constantly looking at ourselves versus other people. And we know that social media, for the most part, is not real. Like the things that are on there is the filtered, it's the best version of ourselves. But students, even though they may intellectually know that fact, that's not how they feel. That's not like what their brain is telling them as they're looking at it. They're feeling like, I am falling short of everybody else. And then just the shortened attention spans that come from, digital devices and social media. Brain rot is a new thing that we're discovering. The statistic that's been floating around is that short form video, like TikTok, Reels, those kind of things, is 5 times more damaging to the brain than alcohol consumption. Just because of the way that it retrains our brain to like not critically think, to not stay engaged, to need to move here, here, and here. And so it's kind of overwhelming. Like as I'm sitting here describing this, I'm thinking like, man, this is, especially as youth pastors, like this is a huge issue for us to tackle, because it's not just our students, it's not just the parents, it starts with us. Like it starts with us here in the room, and those of you that are listening, like we have to be the first ones to try and put these things into practice if we have a hope of discipling, the parents and the students in our ministries.
Yeah, no, and I definitely think that's, man, like you said, just listening to it, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
shoot, like, but I mean, especially when we look at the mindset of like most families coming out of
Yeah.
holidays. I mean, let's be honest, most families don't have the entire school break off, so parents are
Yep.
still working, which means kids are home from at least
Yep.
8 to 5 and might have a couple chores to do if they come from a semi-structured family. But other than that, like it's probably unadulterated screen time access. And in all reality, I know way too many families that just don't have screen time
Yeah.
limits at all. Whether it's a holiday or whether it's a night home from school or whatever. And so like we get into these things that you talked about of the whole screen dependency and comparison culture and shortened attention spans. But then we add the
Yeah.
holidays. And so it's almost like an amplifier of all of
Yeah.
these things. And so this is one of the reasons that we brought up this topic, is just this kind of struggle, and this kind of, like you said, almost a need for attack, when we are going in, and not only is this happening, but like students are walking back into our ministries, they're walking back into school, they're walking back into their social lives, and they have just been amplified on all of these negative aspects of their their
Yeah.
days due to these screen time things. And I mean, like we've said a couple times, I mean, me and David both have kids. Steven's a dad as well. My 7th grader has had a week from heck this week.
Mine
And
too.
he's just like, I don't, like, this has been an awful week. I don't, like, every single day he's come home grumpy. And it's like, dude, what is wrong? And I would say that even attitudes bleed from this over dependency of screen time. And so, and we, I mean, like, and we are very, very much a anomaly when it comes to holiday breaks. Me and my wife both have the entire break off. We limit screen time daily. And so we have all of these things and all of these parameters that we have already put in place, and our kids are still struggling with it.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, this idea of like the kids that have no barriers or no parameters, like, man, it's a really, really big deal. And the stat that you threw out, basically saying that short-term videos are 5 times worse for your brain than alcohol, like, if that doesn't
Yeah.
wake you up, I don't know what will.
It's hard because it's so. And I mean, speaking from experience here, you get on Facebook Reels or you get on YouTube Shorts, or like, I haven't even downloaded TikTok because I know I know myself, and it's like, all right, I don't want to get stuck, but like you just keep going and you keep scrolling, and it keeps hitting that dopamine center in your brain, and you don't even realize how much time you spend on there and how it's shortening your attention span, and so it doesn't feel that wrong when you're doing it. It's just that, like, it's kind of, I mean, the Surgeon General came out a couple years ago and said, hey, like, we do not recommend social media things to people under 16. And that's, I don't know about you guys, when I think of the Surgeon General, I think of smoking. Back in the day when they were like, hey, this thing that everybody does, you should not do this thing. It's not good for you. And so now, like, we're in that place now where the statistics are coming out that says, hey, this obsession with devices and phones and that kind of stuff like that, this is just as bad. Like, it's not our lungs that's being affected, it's our brains. And it's hard when you're trying to talk to teenagers who, a lot of times, that's their lives, their social circles revolve around those things. And so, again, the goal is not to sit and point fingers. We want to have compassion, knowing that, okay, just like they may be addicted to these things. And just like with other addictions, your brain gets rewired. And so, yeah, it's a big problem. But I think it's one that, just because of the nature of where the Lord has put youth pastors, I think it's something that we're called to speak into, not just psychologically, but spiritually and theologically. Like, what's the antidote to, the doom scrolling? What's the antidote to scroll fatigue?
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I've seen is just this idea of, like, when you, and this just kind of popped up into my head as you were talking, normal phone calls aren't good enough anymore.
Yeah.
My junior high student FaceTimes every single person he calls. And like, it sounds funny, but like, it goes back to that screen. They want to be on that screen. Holding the phone up to their ear is not good enough.
Yeah.
And so they are, even in that dynamic, it is absolutely revolutionizing the way that these kids think and the way that these kids do life. And in all reality, it's probably, like you said, it's doing way more harm than good. But so, just to kind of shift and go into the ministry aspect of this, how is this showing up in our ministries? We see disengagement. Students aren't really engaged. They don't have a desire to be engaged. I sat down with high school students on Sunday, And I was like, hey, like, I just want y'all to know, like, there's a verse that's like, just this mindset of like application has really kind of been hitting me. And I can't think of the passage off the top of my head, but the ones who place their foundation on the rock withstand the storms, and the one that place their foundation on the sand doesn't. I can't think of the
Matthew
verse right now.
7.
But with that being,
Matthew 7.
do it. Matthew 7, yeah, 24 through 28 or something to that nature. Um, and so I was going to say Matthew 17, but that was wrong and I knew it. So, but with that, I told my high schoolers, I was like, hey, like my leaders, I was like, hey, in my time over the winter break, I was like, this has really convicted me and this is something I want to improve on for our ministry. How can we do more practical application? And how can we build that spiritual discernment and spiritual discipline of being able to do this to where like we do a lesson but then you take it home and actually apply it to your life? And literally they were like, force us to do it, that's the only way we'll get it done. And it was like, man, that's terrifying. Like, this is, and one of my kids brought this up. He goes, he was like, I think this completely like loses the point. He was like, this is supposed to be spiritual discipline, not discipline us spiritually.
Oh,
And I
that's
was like,
good. That's real
oh
good.
shoot. And it's so it's just this mindset of like disengagement is, I mean, and that's what this is it's like, well, we don't really like, we probably won't do that, like, unless you make us like make us turn it in and like give us a grade or something, and then I'll do it. And it's like, but that's disengagement right there. Is like, students are disengaged, students are passive, and then they have a desire for very low risk participation. They don't want things to be like required of them. They don't want leadership roles. There are some that still do, but a large group of them now are just like, hey, I'm just here. Like, let's not make this more than it needs to be. And we've seen this huge shift, but I'm not going to say all of this comes from screen dependency, because like all of these things have happened before, but I do think that these are getting worse. Um, and so I think the leadership shift that we need to see is, students don't need more content. Students don't need more screens. Students don't need a bigger stage. They need a space to respond. They have to bring that creative aspect of faith back, that practical application aspect back, and we have to work on making that the forefront of what we're doing. Like, the gospel message is clear, but then like, what do we do with that? Is it a consumer market like it's cell phones and everything else, or are we challenging and making them apply it to their lives in a way where they want to? And I think one of those things with the creativity, and we talked about the spiritual creativity, is this mindset of like, we have to start challenging our kids to think creatively, because if we don't, like, we are just building more consumer culture in the place where consumer culture doesn't need to be at all. So with that, obviously, David, there's some theological foundations to this. Run us through them, but I mean, it ultimately comes back to creativity. But like, what do you got?
Yeah, so Genesis chapter 1, 26 through 27 lays down the foundation. It says, Then God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the and birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. We know that. But jumping over to Ephesians chapter 2. I'm going to go back just a little bit to verse 4. But God, being rich in mercy, because of his great love, which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace, you have been saved, and raised us up with him and sealed us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of your own doing. That's huge. This is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one can boast. And then kind of the key verse in this, for we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Ultimately, it's that, we've all preached it several times, especially with students struggling with identity. It's like God has created us with a purpose and a plan, and we've heard the God's original masterpiece, I'm sure, videos and different things, and paintings and just beautiful ways that people have created to help people understand that God has created us, number one, in his image, but with a purpose and a plan. And I probably preach that almost more than anything else I preach, is like, we have to understand that God created each and every one of us unique with a purpose and a plan. And I don't mean like the typical, like, worldly, you're unique, shine, slay queen crap. Okay, I shouldn't call it crap, but I hear it so much that it drives me crazy. But what I am saying is that God has created you, so go do the thing that God created you to do. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. And I guess thinking through everything we've talked about, we're talking a lot about students here, but remembering that we are also talking to youth pastors and parents and different things like that. Like, I find it interesting. I don't know exactly what happened outside of, again, this is not by your own works, but God who did it in you. This After Christmas, I got really sick, and it was like the first time I've been sick in months and months. And I was like, man, this is great. Or it's not great, but it was like getting an opportunity to slow down, I should say, because it had just been such a long, busy season that I think I just needed to lay down for a second. And one thing that I did, and it wasn't by any means intentional, but I decided this time, while I'm sick, I'm not going to allow myself to consume anything. I'm just going to lay there and rest. And Brent especially knows, like, I don't rest well, like, ever. In my mind, I have to be doing something, and if I'm not doing something, then I can consume something just so I keep my brain occupied. My ADHD brain cannot sit still long enough. And uh, so I don't rest. I never do. And this time I just decided I needed to lay down and rest. And if I slept, great. If I just stared at the wall, that's fine. I'm going to allow myself the opportunity to be bored. And what's funny is, I don't know if that is the direct, and Stephen can certainly give us your opinion of it. But I found that when I finally got out of bed, this wave of creativity just seemed to crash over me. Like, it seemed like my music, I've been working on a lot of songs. I've shared some of them with Brent. Like, I started writing even more. Like, I've been writing a lot, but like, I wrote even more, and they were even better. And it was like bursting out of me. And I've been working on writing this book about Judas. And before this period of time, over the last year, I had maybe written 10 pages. I had my layout, I had my structure, and I've done all my research. I've done all this, but it's been just little sporadic notes here and there. In the last week, I think I've written 40 pages. Um, and it's like, I can't stop creating, weirdly enough. And I don't know if that's weird, but there was I can't help but wonder if there's a link between that moment of rest and embracing the boredom and all of that, and maybe being away from my computer for a while, that all of a sudden this wave of creativity is just flooding out of me. And I thought by now, surely it would have stopped. You get back to your busy routine, but it hasn't. Like, I have been like, it's weird. It's like I've been finding little moments. It's like, oh, I have 10 minutes. Great. Let's go write. I got 10 minutes. Let's grab my guitar, and it's like, it's almost like I'm looking for moments to fill those creative moments more than I'm looking for my phone. Like I've forgotten to bring my phone to work 3 times in the last week, and I haven't missed it one bit. So I don't know. Something's changing in me. And I don't know. Maybe Stephen, you can
Yeah,
speak
I
on that.
think I think there's a direct connection to boredom and creativity. Like the space to not do anything. Like just if you observe kids and play, like that's how kids come up with their own games and their own stuff. Like that's how we grew up, back in the 90s, you when you didn't have as much stuff to do and you're just outside and it's like okay, you just figure it out. Kind of that free play. And so like I think that's the way we're made. Like we're made in the image of God. He's creative. He's made us to be creative as well. Like uniquely fashioned us in his image where I mean just like you're saying, David, like all of us, we have those unique parts of us that God's given that says, "Hey, I made you to be able to do this in a unique way that's going to bless others." And it's the same for our students. And so when we're constantly having stuff like the intake is on and we're just consuming that part of our brain that's creative that like can just sit and use that space to produce like unique things, that part is dormant when we're just consuming. And so I think rest is a huge part of it. I think boredom's a huge part of it. And when we get into that space, I mean, I believe if you did brain scans, and you were to look at, okay, what part of my brain is active, you're going to see different parts lighting up when we're not just consuming all the time. And it is like that's the way we were made to live. Like you think about David with the Psalms and just the time he had to compose those things. Or when I look at the heavens, the works of the fingers, the moon and the stars which you've ordained, who am I? Or I think about you on the watches of the night, or I greet you with sunrise, with praise, and those kind of things. Like when our mind is free from intake, I think we go back to that place of the way that God made us, where we can dream and we can think and we can find joy in the stuff that God has given us. And so it's yeah, I think there's a direct connection, and again, not just for students, but for us. And I think when we experience that, like that's the key to teaching parents and teaching our students, because they'll see that in us. They'll see that, oh wow, there's like, hey, like yeah, that's David, but like it's a different kind of David. Like he's like there's this stuff that's flowing out of him, and I think especially for students like that, they respond to honesty, to realness, more than they do platitudes and whatnot. And so yeah, definitely a link there.
Yeah, no, and I would totally agree with that. And this was in our notes, and I really just like this line. It says, "Creativity is not an elective in discipleship. It is evidence of bearing God's image." And with that, like the beauty behind that is like when we look at this dynamic of creativity, like we are all called to be creative. We are all called to create things. And I genuinely think that that's a part of who we are as people. God has innately wired that in us. Now, what we create is depending on who we are and how God has made us, but we are all called to be creative. We are all called to be making things. And so, like, when you look at this, though, formation happens, and we talked about from content to formation last week, and how we are moving from this idea of like, what more knowledge can we throw, like how much knowledge can we throw at our students, instead of how can we work towards forming them to become who they're supposed to be. And so when we do that, like we have to move students from consumption to contribution. What can I do? How can I be involved? What can I take part in? Instead of just saying, what do you have for me? And so are our programs designed for that? Are we designed for only attendance, or are we designed for creative expression? Where do our students get to create? Do we have places in our ministries where they're allowed to create and not just receive? And I think those aspects of this are huge. And of course, this looks different with 100 different students. But even when we think about our student leadership opportunities, are we giving them opportunities to create? Like, when's the last time we just said, "Hey, here's this idea, run with it,"
Yeah. And I
which is
think
really, really important.
even more, to your point, like I have always found, and maybe it's just being an artist for as long as I've been, it's like I've learned over the years, especially in design, is like you have to fail to succeed. And so I find opportunities, and thankfully, in what I have to offer, our students in the music and media side, is like there's so many opportunities to fail, it's laughable. If you think about it, like, especially on a media side, like when a student is learning how to run media, it's mostly pretty easy. But one of the things, and I think it goes back to points that we've already made here, is like I have students that are like, hey, can you just make it like make each slide in the exact way that you're going to lead worship and speaking, stuff like that. Like all I want to do is just press a button, one button. And like my the servant's heart in me goes, okay, I whatever will help you. But then I'm like, but what does that benefit you? It doesn't benefit you at all. Like, I want to know that you are so locked in and paying attention that when we are in a chorus and the Holy Spirit says, hey, go back to verse 1, I can just do that and you're not like freaking out and melting down. But even if you do, I want you to work through that. How about when the internet stops working and you have to figure out how to troubleshoot making it, fixing it, and maybe you have to restart ProPresenter and all of that. Like I want them to have those experiences where, could I fix it in 2 seconds? Of course I could. But there's something that happens and confidence that's built when a student sees a problem and they have to work through the problem. And by doing it, I think there's just, and I could be wrong here, but I think the same part of the brain that lights up when you create something brand new is the same place that will light up when you fix something, and the accomplishment that comes with, this was not working and I found a solution, and now like I've saved the day, quote unquote. And same
Well,
thing
and I
with
think that
music.
applies. I think that applies to anything. I mean,
Yeah.
I've mentioned it a couple times over the course of the last couple months of the podcast. My wife and I bought a house in April that we've been remodeling, and there are so many projects that just walk by because I don't have the motivation to do them. But every time I get a project done, I'm like, man, that's awesome! Like, I'm so glad I did that. Like, and it's like, why can't I just find the motivation to do the rest of them? And I think that's how a lot of us are wired to think in anything, like whether it be like a creative aspect like art or music or anything to that nature. We kind of begrudgingly do it until we get that, like Steven said earlier, we get that dopamine hit and we're like, oh, that was really fun. I'm really glad we did that. Like, or man, that looks really good. And what I think more than anything is like, there's in our living room, we had this weird built-in bookshelf thing. I don't really even know what to say. Um, but it was really, really funky, like framed. It looks like they had a closet and just took the door frame out and left the closet. If I can, like, I don't really know how to describe it other than that. But so there is a like a bookshelf in there, and our ideas for like what we were going to do with this has changed a couple times, but it sat dormant in our house for like until 2 weeks ago. And it was just one of those things. It was like, well, we don't really know what to do. And then my wife finally was like, hey, why don't we just turn it into more pantry space? And I was like, well, we need a door. Bought French doors, they didn't fit, and then I kind of lost motivation again because I was like, oh man, that's like, that was dumb, kind of thing like that. You kind of discourage yourself. And then we decided on a barn door. And as soon as we put that barn door up, man, I finished the whole project in probably 3 days. And it was just one of those things. It's like, I think when we see those opportunities for creativity, we see those opportunities, and it's not even necessarily just creativity. When we see our success in creativity, when we see the finished project, or when we see the final idea, or when in art or music, when we see it coming to light, then like that creativity just explodes in us, like, because we love seeing those things come to fruition. And so I think with that, and David, you kind of touched on this a little bit, is just this idea of like, when we give our students opportunities to do things in our ministry, we got to make sure that they see the finished project. And then we also have to show appreciation for them, because that's a fire that if you start it, just like you said, when you did that time of rest and that time of getting off screens and everything else, once you started being creative and you found the appreciation for it, man, like, it's a wildfire. And so I think that's the thing that we need to be asking in our ministries, is just this: how do we establish, first off, how do we establish opportunities for students to be creative and utilize their faith creatively? But then also, um like, how do we allow them to see the finished product or project, and how do we allow them to actually be hands-on with it? And I think that's really, really big. And so the big thing with that is, I think we have to move, and I said this earlier, from a consumption driven ministry to a formational ministry. And the thing is it's pretty straightforward when you look at this. You go from content heavy, students just watch, performance driven, worship teams, stuff like that, low ownership where students just come in and leave, to participation, practice centered, presence driven, high ownership. When you give students the opportunity to own their own youth ministry, they buy in huge. Whether that be social media, whether that be the praise team, whether that be speaking, we do all of those in our youth ministry, and our kids, like, I probably one of my favorite things I've heard in a long time. We This is our first Wednesday night back. Our students started last Tuesday in school, and I had students ask me, "Why didn't we meet last week?" I was like, "Well, the rest of our church didn't, so we start when the rest of our church does." They're like, "Yeah, but I would have come. Like, I wanted to be there." Like, it's like, that's great. I'm really glad that you like, but we start as a whole, like, our whole church does it together. And but it was just this dynamic of like, I love the fact that my kids literally asked why we weren't there, and then complained that we should have been there because they wanted to be there. Like, which is really, really cool. And so I think part of that though is through participation, through allowing them to practice, through being presence driven and high ownership, like, kids get invested and they love it. And then also they find ways to apply faith aspects to their lives, that hopefully last beyond youth ministry.
Yeah, and when I think about practicality in that, I think we have to be as flexible as possible. And what I mean by that is like, and I don't want this at all to come off as like a brag for what we're doing or whatever, but just more than anything, just kind of a praise report, if you will. This past Sunday, we had the opportunity to go serve somebody in our church, and so we meet for youth on Sunday nights, and I got a phone call in the week from a member of our church who actually both of you guys should know, Rod Wheeler, who's moving. And so he's moving to be closer to his brother in a really nice care facility, and really physically limited and disabled. Not that he's ever really tried to let that limit him, but um, you guys both know, or at least I know Stephen for sure knows, like, man is a workhorse, but has very, very strong physical limitations with his body. And I don't know if it's like a palsy thing. I never asked, but regardless, he was needing help moving, and a little overwhelmed by the task, and trying to get things packed up and moved before February. And so he just said, "Hey, do you have any students at all that maybe would be willing to help? I'll pay them," and all this other stuff. And I'm like, keep your money. Like, I was like, immediately, I was like, this is an opportunity to put into practice all the things that we've been teaching. When somebody in our community needs help, we step up. That's one of our core values. And so I just sent a message to our group meet, our student um, and parent group meet, and just said, "Hey guys, we have an opportunity. What do y'all think?" And what I love, and I was already about to ask it, and one of our students said, "Why don't we? We already meet on Sunday nights. Why don't we go and serve him on Sunday night? Because that'll be the opportunity, probably the best opportunity that we have to have more students go and help." And I was like, yes, they get it. And so they showed up, and dude, they worked their tail off. I was like, guys, we have 2 hours. I want to be really, really intentional. And one of the things I said is, guys, let's maybe just leave the phones in the car. We're not going to need them outside of like keeping time. We all have watches. Sandra Graham and I will cover all of that. And so let's just get there and focus. Let's not spend the time talking to each other. And like, if you want to talk with Rod, that's great. But like, let's not make this about us. There's time for fellowship other times. Like, we'll go eat afterwards, but like, let's be really intentional this time. And I thought there was no way we were going to finish. We had 2 hours. We finished, and it wasn't just like, I mean, like we were done early, and we were like, "Hey, Rod, what else can we do? How else can we support?" And he was like, "That's everything I've got." And so it's like, "Great, let's spend some time just praying over you." And so getting to see the students get to pray over Rod and kind of like commission him and send him off, and it was just a really beautiful night. And afterwards we all went to Whataburger and ate, and I just kept telling the students, I was like, how absolutely proud I was, that they gave up their night. They gave up what we could have had, games and food, and I mean, we still ate, but like we could have done all the normal things that we do on a Sunday night. And usually youth, there's that stigma that youth are so self-focused that they wouldn't want to give up something like that, but it was the student's idea. And so giving them that leadership to say, hey, why don't we give up our night and go serve and support. And it was a incredible thing. And then being able to see that, and so many of our parents were just so proud of them. They were walking we all went to Waterburger, and so parents were coming to picking them up, and like they're like, man, that's just so cool. And good job, students. And like really giving them high fives and stuff, like Wes Gill and several others that just like just showing that appreciation, just seeing the students light up, like, hey, we did something good today, like this is awesome. And so I don't know, it was certainly a special night and special opportunity, and it's just an example of what happens when we sort of take the reins off and just let the students serve. um,
Well,
yeah.
it goes back to those mindsets of student participation, practice centered. Hey, let's go practice what we've been talking about. Let's make this a reality. And so doing all those are really, really important. And I mean, yeah, I think that's spot on. And so with that though, the other thing that Stephen talked about was rest. I feel like this is one that we preach all the time. We know what we have to do. We just have to make time to do it. And so with that though, like you can find time and time and time again, where Jesus withdrew from noise before stepping into what he was supposed to do. Like Mark 135, Luke 5:16, like over and over and over and over throughout time. He would retreat, he would go rest, he would retreat, go pray, he would spend time in solitude. But solitude was not disengagement. Solitude was alignment, which is really, really cool. And so I think we have to do that ourselves. Like Steven said, we have to be the ones that kind of lead this. But then also we have to be the ones that are practically applying this into our ministries as well. And if our ministries never slow down or slow students down, we may be speeding them up away from formation, which is a dangerous, dangerous thing to do, because at the end of the day, like, and I, I hesitate to say that, like, look at the last 20 years of youth ministry and all the people that have fallen out of their faith in college, but I genuinely think that that's part of the problem. Is our ministries became programs, our ministries became very consumer driven, consumer mindset, and very, very little application. And so when we
What you
go,
win them with is what you win them to.
yeah, yeah, what you win them with is what you win them to. And yeah, we've talked about that multiple times on this podcast. But I think the dynamic is like we see falls and we see rises in ministry. And I think the huge revivals and resurgence and all this stuff that we're seeing on college campuses now is students are seeing the value and they're saying, hey, come with me to learn about this guy, but I'm going to be there to baptize you, or I'm going to be there to worship alongside you. And like it has become a movement because people aren't sitting back, they are moving forward together. And it's really, really been a phenomenal thing to watch. I mean, the revivals across college campuses in the United States, but then also like the revival that's happening overseas in different countries. The I read an article about like a couple hundred mosques being closed due to the build and the rise of Christianity in Muslim countries, like all kinds of crazy stuff. And so like we see these dynamics of like this resurgence in this revival, but I think the big thing with revival is like people are challenged to action and challenged to move, and they're doing it. And so I think that's a huge dynamic to do. And so we are getting closer to the end of our time. I wanted to end with this, or two things. And this is for you, or you could also do a idea of this for your students. And this is just the idea of a challenge. It's create more than you consume. I think David has kind of spelled this out with his life personally over the last 40 minutes. And with that, I think there's a huge, huge need for creativity in ourselves, in our students, and everything else. And so try to find a rhythm of creativity over the next week. You can do creative scripture responses, which like journaling, art, spoken prayer. You can do student led prayer or testimony moments. Do service projects like David did that might require some problem solving. Maybe it's logistical problem solving. Maybe it's just figuring out how to, maybe it's challenging students to get a job done. Um, and then use worship playlists, use visual reflections, um, add creative space before you add content.
You know, one thing that Brent had shared last week that I thought was really good, it's like find things to hand off to students to give to empower them to lead. And one of the really like easy ways to do that, I always go back to media. Um, have what you know, have your list of things, like your order of service, and hand it off to a student and say, hey, could you build the playlist for Wednesday night and Sunday morning? And it gives them that opportunity to have a big part of that, and make it a big deal and celebrate that they're doing it. What sorry, whatever we can do to empower students to have places where they can serve. It may even be as simple as like at one point, and this is really silly, but in the Methodist church, when we do communion, we consecrate the bread and the juice, and we say we don't throw that out because we've consecrated as Jesus, and there's something that feels very sacrilegious about throwing away bread and juice. And so we say, hey, we want it to be consumed, whether we give it to the birds or whatever. And so we had students that their job afterwards was to chug the grape juice and eat the bread. It's silly, but like we had one particular student that was like so proud. Like afterwards, like they'd all be talking and stuff. He goes, "Hold on, I gotta go do my job." He'd grab the chalice and just start chugging, dude. And I was like,
My
and
job is to
afterwards,
finish off Jesus.
at one point, I was so sure the student was going to chug the chalice and just drop it like a mic drop, like, boom, did it. I have served. I am, and it was so funny too because he'd go around telling everybody, he's like, I got extra Jesus because I got the bread, I got the juice, and he was proud of it. And I was like, you know what? He was serving something that seems so silly, but it mattered, and it's creating a rhythm of creativity. I don't know if I don't know that that's creative, but if that sparks something that allows that student to be empowered to create later,
That's
we've won.
huge because, like, I think being away from youth ministry for almost a year now, like one of the things I reflect on is that, like, as youth ministers, our job is, it's a lot longer, like a bigger scope than I think it feels in the moment. Because in the moment, we're worried about week to week, we're thinking about this, but really it's a spiritual formation for life. Like we want to help these students learn how to walk out their relationship with God, how to be creative, how to serve, not primarily for right now. I think that's secondarily. Like, I think the primary thing is in the future when they are leading their families, when they are discipling their kids, when they are serving in the church in different ways. Like, and I think two things I thought about. The first thing was, I think sometimes my ego got in the way of me allowing students to fail and to take ownership and to have creativity, because I was more concerned about what are my volunteers going to think about me, what are the parents going to think about me, what's my pastor, what's he going to think about me if this doesn't look this way or if this doesn't feel this way. And so just that conviction, like as you guys are talking about that, it's like, man, like I feel like my pride got in the way of giving students that opportunity. Like I mean, you're right, they need that opportunity to learn, to discover, and to push past that initial discomfort of this is new, this is weird, it doesn't look right. Like that's how life works. Like, in order to, I play guitar, and so the tips of my fingers are super calloused. In order to get there, there had to be blisters first, and it was painful. But you just had to trust the process and push through. And I think that's true with students. And that goes to the second thing I think about when I talk to parents. One of the most important things I tell them is that, like, you need to teach kids how to believe in themselves. In order for them to be able to believe in themselves, you first have to believe in them. Like, you have to show them that there's something worth believing in. And again, I think that's very theologically founded in being made in the image of God. But I think about students, and I think about, like, giving them the opportunity and saying, hey, I see this in you. Like, I see the Holy Spirit of God at work in you in this way, or I see this gift that God's given you. Like, and as we believe in them in that kind of way, like, I feel like it's almost a bridge sometimes to where, like, hey, we're laying these bricks, we're laying this foundation that the Lord can ultimately, like, one day he just gets a hold of them. And maybe that's our job as the seed planters, is to plant that seed of, like, hey, like, let me believe in you this much, and hey, that little that I believed in you, like, the Lord, like, his belief in you, like, is so much greater because he made you and he fashioned you for things like this. And so I just remember being stuck in the moment in youth ministry and feeling the pressure of the week and of all the different things going on, but, like, the blessing that we have to invest in kids and to maybe be those people who, hey, we're gonna start to help you build this foundation that's not just for right now or not just for this year, but for the rest of your life, that that God made you and he loves you and he's given you gifts. And so I just if I can encourage any youth pastor that's listening, man, like, the work that you're doing is so important and it's so valuable in God's eyes, and not to lose sight of that. And if there are, like, I mean, again, I feel conviction about that as I think back on that. Like, don't let your ego and your pride get in the way of empowering students, because they're worth it. Like, they need us to believe in them. And man, I believe the Lord can use that in some really powerful ways.
Yeah, well, and I agree with that. I mean, more than just the mindset of youth ministry, like, as a parent, at my wife as a teacher, like, the more opportunities that you give them to empower them and to allow them to see and understand that they are old enough and wise enough to make decisions and do things, like, it builds that sense of appreciation. It builds that knowledge and awareness that they can actually do it, which is really, really important. And so that's huge. No, definitely. And I, one of the things we've been practicing this with my oldest is cooking now. And I don't allow him just to be like, okay, well, today we're having hot dogs. Like, no, like when he is cooking, he's cooked 2 meals in the last 2 weeks. One of them was chicken fried rice by himself on the hibachi. And then the other one was a air fried salmon over rice with a mango strawberry salsa stuff.
So
And
what
like,
I'm hearing is that Steven and I need
Yeah,
to come to
bro.
your
That's
house.
exactly what I want.
right, right. So, but with that being said, it's like, not only do I want you to learn how to cook, but I want you to learn how to cook things that you love. Like, because then that skill will translate when you move out. Because if I teach you how to cook a lot of things that you don't want to cook, like, what good is that? Like, I have to win you to the idea of cooking by cooking the things that you love to eat. Like, that is the beauty behind cooking. Like, you have full control over the things that you eat and don't eat. And so, like, but in order for us to, like, I think, model the appreciation for cooking, I guess, or model the desire to cook, is the fact that, like, I mean, who would, like, David is not a huge fan of country music. If I was like, hey, David, you're going to learn the guitar, but you're only going to play country songs, he probably would have never learned guitar.
Me neither.
So, with that being same premise, though, is like, if you look in that dynamic of, like, if we want our ministries to have opportunities for our students to take it beyond our ministry, we have to give them ways to lead where they want to lead. And so there's huge dynamics of this. And so here's just a couple questions as we close for today, because we're almost at the hour mark. Where can students lead instead of watch? What practices invite risk, not perfection? How do we measure growth beyond attendance? 2 things of encouragement. Creativity flourishes where safety and trust exist. Students won't step out if they don't feel like they're going to be, like, given grace when they fail. Or when they're trusted enough to do it. If you give them a lead role and then you micromanage every lead opportunity that they have, students aren't going to want to do it, because you're not giving them the opportunity to lead. You're just giving them busy work, basically, that you should have done in the first place. But you have to be able to let go. And then finally, small experiments are way greater to start and do than massive overhauls. Don't start a new trend in your ministry that's going to reevaluate everything in your program without giving small experimental opportunities first. Because if you do something and change your entire ministry for it and it fails, guess what? It's a lot harder to recover. So small experiments are way better than massive overhauls. Um, and then finally, just the idea, and this has kind of been our focal point for the day, is we are not raising content consumers. We are forming image bearers. So, with that being said, use wisdom to lead against cultural currents, have courage to simplify, and renew creativity for you and for your students alike through the process of this. And as always, like, as we close, first off, I mean, Stephen, thank you so much for being here and being on the show. We've really enjoyed the mindset of doing the show as we've done for the past couple months. But we've very much had the desire to be like, hey, this person would be perfect for this conversation. So thank you for being on the show. Yeah, no,
One quick
definitely.
plug, because I do know that there are people in our area, the big country, West Texas area. If you are, especially if this sparks some things in you and you want some more information, Stephen's actually coming to our church on February 1st at 6:00 p.m. at First Methodist in Sweetwater, Texas, to go deeper into this idea of disconnect. Do you want to give just a little
Sure.
bit
Yeah.
about it?
No, it's it's a seminar. It's called Disconnected, Escaping the Digital Trap. And so, I'll dive in more to, some of the stuff we opened, I guess, the podcast with, just about the dangers of social media, the rise in anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, all those, the statistics that are coming out now of like what's happened over the last 10 to 15 years. And so we look at that, but then also, like, it's not just a doomsday talk, right? There is hope. There are things that we can do. And so there's a lot of practical advice for adults, for parents, for students, of like, how do we take back like our brains? How do we take back our lives to where, like, this is not our master, but we can be like a master of it, to use it to, like, to glorify God and to do good things. And so it kind of centers around that. We're combining a lot of biblical and theological foundations with research and things we see in God's world. And so, if you're in or around the area, love for you to come to that. If that topic interests you at all, I'd love to come to your church and to speak on that. I have a heart for just encouraging and equipping parents, and so I'm excited, David, to come out and get to hang out with you guys. And it's just it's a need just to know about this stuff, because I feel like a lot of times it's not intentional. As parents, we don't want to just put our kids in those places, but it kind of happens, and there are things we can do to change. So I'm excited about coming out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And to further plug, because I do know that not everybody is in our area, go check out and please, plug your website and stuff like that. But he's got several different seminar topics, but he also does Christian counseling for youth pastors as well. Can you go into that and where they can find your business?
So I do have, like, on our website, anchorandinsight.org. I've got information about the counseling part, the seminar part, and just a real heart for youth pastors. And so if you're listening to this and you are a youth pastor and you feel like, man, like I could benefit from counseling, or I've always thought about it, but their cost has been an issue, or I don't know if, like, I could trust, theologically somebody that I'm going to counseling for, like, I would love to give you like a couple sessions for free. And we do have like a scholarship fund that we bring in, and so we can use that. But man, I believe in youth pastors and in what you're doing. And so, like, that, to me, I feel like I'm just kind of giving back to, like, this thing that was such a beautiful piece of my life, and wanting to equip and just be there for youth pastors. And so, again, if that's something you've thought about, like, look on our website. You can send me a message. I'd love to get in contact with you and just be that space where you can be yourself and not worry about, like, oh my gosh, is this gonna get back to whomever, or like, can I talk about real things? Like, that's my heart. And so I'd be honored to, if that's you listening, like, man, please shoot me an email, shoot me a message on our website. I'd love to get in touch with you.
Yeah, definitely. And so with that, that's our goal, and that's our focus too. We say this all the time: you're not alone. If you don't have a village, allow us to be that. Me and David are here. We'd love to talk as well, about youth ministry or family or anything else you have going on. And so with that, that's our goal. Our goal is to inspire, encourage, and equip you to be a better youth pastor for the church that you're serving in. And we hope that through episodes like this, we're doing that. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have enjoyed this episode, or if you just want to talk, you can reach out to us at Talk Student Men on social media, Instagram and Facebook. And then also you can reach out to us, podcast at studentministryconversations.org. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to share this with youth pastor friends, because we only advertise this podcast by word of mouth. The number of times I've had people in conversation where I'm like, oh, I do a podcast. And they're like, oh, like, is this a new thing? And I'm like, no, we've been doing it for 5 years. They're like, oh, I've never heard of it. Like, or something to that nature. Like, it happens all the time. But then also I've had others where it's like, oh, I've heard of your podcast, I just didn't know it was you. which is cool too.
Like our faces are there.
Yeah, and our faces are on every promo. So,
Yeah.
but with that being said, like our goal is to get this out to every youth pastor that needs it, and we need your help to do that. Share it on social media, share it with a youth pastor friend that you might think needs it. Or because we have a larger influx of these now, if you aren't in youth ministry and you listen to it, first off, thank you, because this I don't want this to sound negative, but we didn't make this with intention of going to anybody else but youth pastors. But we have a ton of people that listen to this podcast that aren't youth pastors, whether they're youth students, whether they're just church members, or just people trying to figure out how to do Christianity well. And how to follow Jesus well. If that's you, like we definitely want to shout you out as well, because there are quite a few of y'all. And so you can share it with anybody, really. And like, we just love to be the opportunity, and love to get this out for people that need it. But until the next episode, we hope that you have a great week, and we will see you next week.